Good evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Tuesday, September 24th to order. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This brings us to 2.4, reiteration of executive session motions.
The board met in executive session to discuss the record of a particular student.
Okay. I'm excited for tonight's meeting. Our work session will give us a chance to take a deep dive into the topic of authentic learning. It will give us the chance as a board and as a community to learn more about what authentic learning really means, how it currently exists in our schools, and which direction we can expect authentic learning will take us over the next few years of our new strategic plan. In advance of our session, I wanted to thank Steve Garcia, Maria Thompson, Tom Callahan, John Sabalos, and all of the other administrators and teachers involved in the preparation of this meeting and for joining us tonight. And I wanted to thank all of the committee members who worked hard on this piece of the strategic planning. Since we have a lot on our agenda, I want to leave ample time for our work session, so I'll make the rest of my comments brief. First of all, I just wanted to mention that due to the Jewish holidays, our next meeting is actually not until October 15th, which is 3 weeks away, so don't miss us too much. Also, later tonight, we'll take a motion to approve our board goals, our committees, protocols, and meeting dates for the year. So I wanted to remind you again, as I did at our last meeting, to stay tuned for communications about our board and district committees, and we hope that you'll consider joining these committees. The fruit of much of what is discussed in these meetings starts to get planted in those committee meetings, and it's certainly a lot of good work that's done in the district, and it's very rewarding to be a part of it. Let's see. One note I wanted to make about our meeting, since we're going to be approving our dates. Beginning in December, our board meetings will move from Tuesday to Wednesday evenings. We'll remind each of you guys about this change periodically, as we know that between the location change being Alumni Hall and now the meeting dates, we're certainly keeping all of you guys on your toes this year. So without further ado, we can move on to section 3.1, which is approval of the minutes from September 10th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Superintendent's Report 4.1.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. And again, thank you for all the folks that are here with us tonight. Very much looking forward to the work that they're going to share. And I think you really will have a great, much deeper understanding, as you said, of authentic learning by the end of tonight. I had the privilege this last few days from Sunday through today to attend the New York State Council of School Superintendents annual fall conference up in Saratoga Springs. So that was great because my hometown, I got to stay with the folks, which is always nice. Happy 80th birthday to my dad. And throughout the weekend, it was great. We had a lot of opportunity to get updates on state ed, on policy changes, curriculum changes, and even just changes in leadership at the state education department, and get some inside information on how those things will be going forward. So it was very exciting. It was really nice too this afternoon. The Chancellor Rosa was speaking about exactly those things and talking about the work that's going to be done over the next 2 years, looking at graduation requirements. And we got a shout out as one of the districts that we're going to be having a direct hand in influencing the research and policy that will hopefully come out of that. So more to come on that. I was very proud that we could get that mention. I shared with the board just a preview copy of the strategic plan flyer that we are working to finalize. Thanks to Alex Wolf for the hard work on that. We're hoping to put that out. It'll just be a simple document that we can use as a district to start communicating out the kind of the big picture of what that looks like. And then as we go through our work sessions and learn more about each and then develop our fall focus, we're going to be doing a much broader spread on that. So hopefully that will be the design that will be with us going forward. And we'll be getting that out probably within the next week, starting to see that out at our schools and meetings. Also related to that, and I'm not going to steal too much of his thunder tonight, but I want to thank everybody for participating in the thought exchange. It was our first time using that with the community. It's a new tool, so I know it takes a little getting used to, the logging in. Some people didn't realize other people were going to get to see their thoughts, so next time they might proofread a little bit more. But no, it was really very, very exciting to see the thoughts that went in there. They very much, in my mind, paralleled what we got from the strategic planning surveys. You saw a lot of similar themes there. So that tells me that we were the strategic planning process went well. We're on point with what is out there and the thoughts of our community. And Dr. Garcia is going to incorporate some of that feedback into tonight's presentation, and we'll be working with the administrative team to delve more deeply in that. Each month, as we prepare for the work sessions, we'll do that again. We're hoping the community will get more used to the tool, and our participation will increase even more as we continue to use it. Related to the strategic plan, we have an upcoming event. We will be publicizing that very soon as well. We have Brenda and Franklin Campbell-Jones. They are the trainers that we've been working with to develop our understanding of cultural proficiency, which falls under the cultural competence goal area. They're coming to start our second cohort of staff and parent training, October 7th and 8th. They are going to be doing a parent session, a parent information session for us as part of their work on October 7th, 7 o'clock, right in the middle school library. So we'll be sending out communications about that and very much encourage parents to come to understand more about just what it is. It's not going to be the same in-depth level of training. They may run us through one or two of the protocols that we do in the training, but we felt it's really important for parents to understand what is this cultural competence continuum, why are we training on it, what will be the impact for us long-term, and for them to understand a little bit more about what we've been preparing and equipping ourselves with. So I would invite everyone to come out on the 7th at 7 o'clock. Today we had in celebration and support of Voter Registration Day. We had students in the high school on both ends of the political spectrum leading the charge to hand out information, to get student information on voter registration. And we also had some folks from Senator Biagi's office out front in high school as well, trying to just reinforce those efforts and get as many of our students as are eligible or will be eligible to vote registered. So we're always excited to support the democratic process in that way. One message that again has started to go out we want to reiterate it for folks. On Thursday, Pelham Dale will be being paved. That's going to present some problems. So,
All parts of Pelhamdale?
pretty much. Actually, the Manor side, the Manor portion of, so the Village of the Pelham Manor will be paving Pelhamdale from Colonial to Boston Post Road pretty much all day on Thursday. So Manor Lane, Siwanai Place will be inaccessible for driving, for staff, parents, anyone, and for parking. So as a result, they will be relieving parking restrictions in the other neighborhood areas. So we encourage anyone who's going there to park some of the other streets, though you should be okay for the day. We're suggesting people park on Esplanade and use the pathway that leads down from Esplanade to Manor Lane. Obviously, neighbors are going to be dealing with the same issue, so it's going to be a little bit of a traffic difficulty. The best thing you can do is walk to school on Thursday. So for those students who normally get a ride who are able to walk, we strongly encourage you to do that. And then almost finally for the big picture things. No, this is final. The last item is my usual opportunity to highlight the successes of our high school students in particular. Congratulations to seniors Lance Brady, Asher Lau, and Peter Way. They have all been designated as semifinalists in the 2020 National Merit Scholar Competition. And congratulations to the following students for being recognized as commended students in the same National Merit Scholarship Program. Albert I., Lucas Fredbeck, Lucas Glist, Michael McKierney, Stephen Munn, Emily Nakayama, Matthias Spunberg, and Sophie Shu. Congratulations to our varsity football coach, and I think I mentioned this briefly last time, it's a better explanation. Our varsity football coach, Artie Vigiano. He was named to the Lou Retino High School Coach of the Week, by the New York Giants and Gatorade following our Pelicans' thrilling 14-7 overtime victory on the road against Harrison back on Friday, September 6th. We're very proud of them and proud of all the athletes that competed during homecoming events. There was lots of great spirit shown by our students on the field and off, and we're proud of all of their efforts, win or lose. Congratulations to the staff of the 2019 Pelican Living in Color. The Columbia Press Scholastic Association has awarded a gold medal to our Pelham Memorial High School yearbook. Very proud of those efforts. A tremendous amount of work goes into that. This is my last item is back to homecoming, and I see some of the faces that were very inherently involved in that. High school's Homecoming Spirit Week was very successful. Last week's Spirit Week began with both students and staff dressing in various outfits. Many wore pajamas for Pajama Day, Hawaiian shirts and sunglasses were evident the next day, and of course our red, white, and blue for USA Day. Toward the end of the week, students enjoyed a club fair on the front lawn of the school on Thursday, and then the week culminated with the week's pep rally and many students wearing their Pelham Pride colors, a blue, gold, white, or outfits supporting their favorite athletic team. We also had our cafeteria joining in with themed lunches throughout the week to match our Spirit Week, which was a great support from Whitson's. Homecoming games were all well attended by alumni, students, staff, many parents and community members, and everyone had a great time. So it's been a great opening to school. We're very proud of our students and our staff and excited about the year to come. That ends my long report for a short night.
4.2, do we have any Board of Education committee reports? I don't think so, right? Okay. 4.3, Assistant Superintendent update on finance and facilities.
Hi, good evening. I know there's a large agenda to discuss for tonight's work session, so I'll try to be brief. Just some quick updates, though. On this evening's board meeting, we're going to ask the board to select the adjusted base proportions for next year's tax assessment roll. What this really has to do is we're going to ask you to choose the base proportion which has the lesser impact to the resident taxpayer. So if you think of your taxes being broken up into two portions for the entire community, half of it to commercial properties, or a portion to commercial properties, a portion to homestead properties, what we want to do is we want to pick the assessment roll in the year in which the lesser burden is borne by the homeowners. I know it doesn't always feel like that for the homeowners, but it's an option that we have every year. And this year, for the first year in many's, actually, we're recommending the 2019 assessment roll versus the 2018 assessment roll. For those who were here last year, we picked the 2017 last year, so we picked the prior year. So we have a new assessment roll every year. With this information, we receive it from the town assessor, and the recommendation again is that we ask the board to select the one that had the lesser impact to the resident taxpayer. Beginning of the year, we had the county-wide last week or 2 weeks ago. They did our food inspection at our cafeteria. Everything went very well. Again, we had a nice coordination with homecoming, which was great. Everything sold out, as Dr. Champ mentioned also, and it was great seeing all the school spirit and the kids having a great time this week. With our facilities and fees, we have a recommendation for facilities and fees on this evening's meeting as well. Those facility fees are unchanged from prior year. What has changed is the reimbursement rate for custodial overtime, and that's really based on the actual cost that we incur. So we want to make sure we're recovering our costs for people who use our facilities. We like people using our facilities in the community, but we just can't gift those services, and that's why we need to recover those costs and cover our costs as we do this. The capital projects are moving along nicely. If you noticed, the flagmen signs were removed on Lincoln Avenue, so that was nice. Those were a nice little reminder of work that had been done, so those went down this week. If you look at Glover, you see a lot of dirt being moved. The curbs are going in. They're lifting the field up actually right now. And once they finish lifting the field, they're going to put in some settlement markers, and you're not going to see a lot of work being done there for about 30 days. It's a 30-day settlement period. So when people drive by the field, they may see these little poles sticking out of the field. Those are actually settlement markers. And we have a testing lab, and they have to go out and measure those markers to make sure the field isn't settling or anything else like that for this time period. And you're going to see that coming up shortly. The tennis court work is moving along nicely. We expect the asphalt to go down tomorrow, or at least later on this week. So it's nice that we're moving along really well. The change order that was approved by the board, the curbing for the fencing, has already been taken care of at the tennis courts. So that's moved along well. At Prospect Hill, the plans for Prospect Hill are all at the state right now. They've been there for a few weeks now, so we're hoping to get those through the review process within the next few weeks. And with the other projects here at the high school, we're gonna go out for the rebid we're planning out in the early October timeframe, as well as for the Hutchinson School in the early October timeframe, with bids hopefully coming back in early November. We're gonna go over all of this with the bond steering committee group on October 2nd. So it's the Wednesday after the long weekend. And we're gonna have a discussion about the construction document estimates, and then the bidding strategy, and what the expectation is, how long we're gonna bid things, and when we're gonna make those decisions, and report back to the board, so the board can make the final decisions for that construction. And I think that is everything that I had. Oh, sorry, a couple things. We have a couple of smaller items. We have a transfer going on. Some of that has to do with reallocation of funds with where we budgeted items during the year. We still need them, we're just spending them in different parts, so maybe it's in a different building or a different part of, say, pupil personnel. So we're asking you to move those funds. And then we're also moving some funds based on the needs of some of our students, which have come up since the budget was passed. And we have 3 very generous donations this week that we're asking you to approve from the PEF.
Good question, Jim.
Yes.
Based on the schedule you just laid out for the bidding, we anticipate construction to begin before the beginning of the year?
If anything, it's going to begin in the mid-December, early January timeframe. So
Best case, mid-December.
best case, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Section 5, financial reports and motions. Do I have a motion to adopt the 2019-2020 Superintendent Board of Education goals?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments? I'm going to read them out loud. Maybe I'll do that first and see if you have any questions or comments. Number 1, oversee implementation of the district's strategic plan, including action items to support the following goals. A, cultivate an empathetic, inclusive, and equitable school community that values and encourages respect, voice, and agency for all students. B, develop innovative problem solvers, critical and creative thinkers, effective communicators, and strong collaborators who can apply their knowledge and skills to navigate real-world challenges. C, deepen our systemic, academic, and social emotional supports for the health, safety, and well-being of the whole child, recognizing that our learners need to balance academic, physical, social, and emotional demands. 2, develop a responsible budget that manages the district's short and long-term finances in a way that balances the preservation of programs, staffing, and operational efficiencies. 3, oversee implementation of the 2018 bond referendum projects, administering all processes necessary to adhere to established timelines and budgets, and implementing a plan for transparent collaboration with the board and community. Now I will ask, do you have any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. I'll take section, do you mind just exiting out of that from 5.2 and 5 through 5.4 as a consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So, second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving right along. 5.5 to 5.8, I'll take as a consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 5.9 through 5.11. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, 5.12, motion to accept donation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I'll read this one out loud. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education, and the Pelham Union Free School District, that we accept a donation of $18,000 for grant 2001 Building Bridges to expand a disability awareness program for the grades K through 5, which was successfully piloted at Colonial Elementary School last year, to the other 3 elementary schools, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. And also, upon recommendation, that we accept the donation of $6,000 for grant 2002 called 1/8 size bass instrument to provide a 1/8 size bass instrument to each of the 4 elementary schools to be used by 3rd graders in elementary orchestra class, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. And also to accept the donation of $1,600 for grant 2003 called The Door Literary Magazine to fund the 2019 publication of the Pelham Memorial High School's Literary Magazine, which is published once a year at the end of the school year and celebrates and recognizes the creative talents of the student body, and that gratitude be tongue-tied tonight, be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very generous. Once again.
And I'll add too, I'm very appreciative to the PEF. These fit so squarely in the strategic plan goal areas of authentic learning, whole child, and cultural competence. So we really appreciate their support to move forward our initiatives
Yeah,
all throughout the year.
great. Okay, so now this brings us to section 6. Section 6.1, motion to approve Schedule A instructional. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Which I leave of absence that we're requesting the board approve of, and also 2 appointments. One for an ELL teacher and also another one for a leave replacement for mathematics. Also a previous, just rectifying a change that was made in a previous appointment.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 6.2, motion to approve Schedule B, annual appointments of 2019-2020.
So moved.
Second.
So we have some, just again, as like the last meeting, we had many annual appointments that were made, and this is just now rectifying some changes with the annual appointments.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? 6.3, to have a motion to approve Schedule C instructional.
So moved.
Second.
So substitute teachers, a couple of new substitute teachers, and also the appointment of a student teacher.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 6.4, motion to approve Schedule C non-instructional staff. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a resignation or rescission of 4 school monitors. And then we also have the retirements of 2 full-time folks. Our nurse at Siwanoy School, Michelle Rivera, gave us her 6-month irrevocable resignation. And Lana, well, I'll just call her Lana, but now that I know why. Is that Anova? I think I did okay.
Yes.
Ricky for H as the last name, I think. I don't have any reason not to, but we thank Lana for her time. She also put in her 6-month letter for resignation as well, for purposes of retirement for both of them. We wish them both very well.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 7, People Personnel Services. 7.1, do I have a motion to approve Schedule D?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 8 is new business. Do we have any new business? Going once, going twice. So section 9 is our work session on authentic learning. How do we do? We got there and did pretty well on time.
Yeah, that was good, that was great. I'd just like to direct the board, I did not set up the fancy presentation like Dr. Champ did early in the year with the, the destruction of the land over there in Hutchinson. But if you follow in board docs, in the administrative section, the presentation is there. So if you can't see it in the screen there, you can always just project it right onto your individual laptop. Again, thank you for having us. We have some guests here this evening, and it's always a pleasure to take opportunity, really to spend time discussing a little bit further about teaching and learning. So what we want to do tonight is, rather than just, it's always changing in terms of how we do these work sessions. So at some point I'm going to stand down with the teachers, and they're going to be able to speak to how they reflect authentic learning, what it means to them and what it means for the kids. So tonight I just want to break down a little bit of what we're going to discuss and how this is going to kind of the framework for tonight's discussion. One is really to kind of, the first thing, we're going to examine some very early feedback, as Dr. Sham said, through the thought exchange that was sent out this past week to the community, and just get their initial ideas and beliefs about this authentic learning strategic goal. So that's one thing we're going to do. At the outset, I think it's important to kind of share some of that feedback. And then I'm going to provide an overview. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but to talk about the authentic learning strategic goal, and then the 3 action steps which are involved with it that the steering committee recommends that we follow. And then at the end, which really I like to spend the bulk of the time, is looking at what authentic learning means in practice in its current state in the school district. That's why we invited the teachers. They are reflective of the learning that's currently going on. Much of it, not all of it, but much of it is really, it was built upon the last strategic plan, when we thought about 21st century learning. We looked at performance-based assessments. We looked at changing experience, culminating experiences from Regents exam courses to something different. So you'll hear that tonight, and I want to thank them for coming here, because when you talk about teaching and learning, unless you kind of bring it to life, you're not going to understand it. And the first thing we really need to do, if you walk away with one thing tonight, I just hope you have a better understanding of what authentic learning means and what it could look like for our kids. So with that said, if we move to this thought exchange. So, I was thinking about maybe sharing this at the end of the presentation, but I think it's really important because it's really fresh in our mind. Dr. Champ just kind of shared this information with me the past few days, and this is one of the ways that this data can be collected from thought exchange, which is basically they're participants who write statements, and the question really is to responding to was, as a district, how well are we addressing authentic learning, and where would you like to see us grow in this area? So this was just the past week. Some of you probably participated in September 2019. So what this is, I just took the top 10 rankings, and essentially about 296 people in the community participated, and there were 226 thoughts, and these are some of the thoughts, and then out of those thoughts, people went back into it, the participants, and about 40% of those people started ranking them through stars, like star 1 star, 2 star, all the way to 5 stars. So we took the highest ranked, and I just want to share them with you because it kind of gives a framework in terms of what people are thinking about authentic learning. So, and I found these pretty fascinating, also validating sometimes. So number 1, this was the top response that got the most stars. Demand excellence in writing and speaking. That was number 1. Number 2, personal finance and job skills classes would be helpful for high school students. By the way, there were 2 statements back to back, really 2 and 3, that dealt with personal finance. Number 3, not teaching secondary school students how to write properly. That wasn't a criticism of like we're not doing that.
Right.
The statement was
General statement.
colleges are really having a really tough time remediating students, and this happens for students who graduate from public school and private school. So our question really should be framed: how are we doing that? What does that look like for our kids? Are we preparing our kids to be good writers before they move on to secondary level of school? So number 4, strengthening our communication, writing, presentation, and grammar program. Number 5, teachers need to be trained and supported in how to have hard classroom conversations. So in light of the politics today, that's something that's much on people's minds. Like, how are kids able to share their ideas, their beliefs in a safe environment without feeling one way or the other? And that's hard for, I think, adults, as you may know, but also very hard for our teachers. So that's recognized as something which we have to do a better job at. This is where it starts to get really more granular in terms of authentic learning. If the model of science research, which is research, speaking, presentation skills, and internships, could be broadened to incorporate other subject areas. I found that fascinating. This one's my favorite, though. It is not clear from the strategic plan how authentic learning will be implemented, nor how its effectiveness will be assessed. So that gave me thought. pause because obviously maybe we weren't clear enough. Number 8, I think at the high school level there should be more real-world electives. Number 9, STEAM, not just STEM. So where's the arts in this experience throughout all the subject areas? And then number 10 was there needs to be more authentic learning opportunities in the arts, humanities, and social studies. So broad and beyond, math and science. So at the outset, it was really interesting for, I think, us, and again, this was just the first time I'm sharing it with people, but even with the community, what members of this community are really thinking about authentic learning. I think it kind of gives us some ideas. And I know at the outset when we were developing the strategic plan, in discussions with Dr. Champ is this sort of like a finite plan where we're never going to change anything? And really, I think we really wanted this to be more of a living document. So as we see challenges or see interests or needs that may change, we may kind of navigate it in different places. So that vagueness may be kind of there deliberate so that we can kind of maneuver from what community and students and teachers want to see. So I think that's different from the last plan. But really, I know Dr. Champ shared this on opening day, and how do we get here, right? And I'm like the guy who's been there for 7 years that has seen the last plan at the outset and then into this new plan. And I view this as like strategic plan 2.0, right? The last strategic plan focused on those 4 pillars that we know very well, but it really lends itself, they're direct links to the new plan and the 3 major goals. So from 21st century learning to authentic learning, social emotional learning and extra support morphed into really the whole child. Cultural competency were really, those aspects in each of the former pillars were really recommendations from the diversity task force. And it kind of grew out to a major aspect for our strategic plan. And lastly, professional learning used to be at its own pillar, but it's embedded in everything we do. It underpins every type of learning experience for students and adults that we work on. So I see it really as, we had a 5-year plan, and I always viewed it as, it's going to take longer than just 5 years to try to make this part of the school culture. And I think this next phase of the strategic plan continues that work. But however, I think that some of the differences is that the foundation was created from the last effort, but maybe this portion of our goals are more explicit, they're more qualitative. I think they could be more impactful to the learning culture and can happen more deeply. So that's kind of how I view it a little differently. One thing we needed to do, that's one of our action steps actually, is to define what it is. So when we're gonna have the teachers explain to us, how their experience with kids really reflects the definition of authentic learning, this is what we came up with as our steering committee, right? We have a lot of different definitions and, it's kind of like part of 21st century learning, but what makes it different and how is it different from the last plan? So we really need to kind of look at all these different research pieces, and I share that with the board in my report. And we wanted to distill it to kind of something that was a little bit more, I think, easier to understand. So in essence, authentic learning occurs when there are these characteristics. You have real world problems that mimics the work of professionals. That's one piece of it. It involves the presentation of findings to an audience beyond the classroom. It requires open-ended inquiry and thinking skills like metacognition and reflection on their learning. It also allows students to engage together in discourse and social learning. And finally, it's really important, and this is a key aspect, is that students are directing their own learning in some aspect of it. So we kind of paraphrased some research that was done by a professor up in upstate New York in a senior school, Professor Rule. So with this idea, and to be honest with you, we didn't kind of define it at the outset of the work we were doing. We kind of did this recently because, it was felt it's important for us to really understand, we have a goal, but what is it, right? And we need people in the community and also board members to kind of hopefully distill it to language that it's more meaningful and it's not just educational jargon. And I know there's a lot in there, but I think you can understand when it's more of a real world application that the kids can mimic the work of professionals. There's an authentic audience, there's people that they present to, there's inquiry. So hopefully it's a little bit more tangible for us. So the steering committee wanted to come up with a framework. So, I always talk about Simon Sinek, and we talk we have to start with the why. Why are you doing this, right? Why are we looking at authentic learning? But once you do that, you have to expand it, saying, okay, what's the process of how you get there, and then what's the result? So that's kind of like the lens we were using as a strategic planning steering committee with authentic learning. And it's also kind of a natural progress from the earlier work with 21st century learning. But one thing we're trying to understand is, most of the learning and education throughout history of education, public education, deals with, or it's a reflection of, an economic driver, right? And if you think about the factory model of schools, preparing kids for work, children for secondary level, whether it's work or college, they're major economic drivers, and this is no different today. So we looked at some research, and there was a study done by the World Economic Forum. There was a future of jobs survey. So in 2022, what is the skill demand that's out there? And it happens every few years. What are the employers looking for in workers? Analytical thinkers, innovation, active learning, creativity, originality, initiative, tech design, programming, critical thinking, leadership, social influence. And then they talk about emotional intelligence, which is kind of a new layer for us. Reasoning, ideation, system analysis, and evaluation. So that was a major study that was done by the World Economic Forum. Harvard Business Review looked at colleges and said, what are colleges doing to prepare students? And usually what happens is that when colleges say we have to work on these type of strategies and learning experiences, what does that mean for education and us at the secondary level and elementary level? So Harvard Business Review talked about how college students should be teaching more about emotional intelligence, resilience, empathy, integrity, learnability, and leadership, those soft skills, which are kind of hard to measure. And then even more recently, the Rand Corporation asked employers, they're struggling to find these 21st century workers, ones that they feel are successful. They're looking for people who are beyond knowledgeable of routine cognitive skills and academic knowledge. They're looking for people who can capture competencies in information synthesis, creativity, problem-solving, communication, and teamwork. Apparently, they can't find people like that last year. So when you're asking for the why, I know people say, well, it shouldn't be about the economic piece of it. But that's been driving education forever. And it's really no different today. And we want kids to be successful in college and beyond. So we kind of have to look for these studies to see what could be a good framework for us and for schools. And it points to a different type of learning experiences that's more relevant for kids, and it's something that gives them more student agency. However, there's a caution, and I found this quote, and I just want to share it with you. This is from a teacher, an elementary school principal. He said, I don't like it when people say we need to prepare students for the real world. The truth is, some of them are experiencing more of the real world than we will ever know. What we need to do is prepare them for a better world. So we like to talk about these major skills, but also how will we, a lot of kids, as we know, students that come from different backgrounds, different home experiences, different challenges that we kind of take for granted, many people take for granted, and some kids are actually already in the real world, beyond what we may have experienced when we were younger. And we have to, bless you, understand that and recognize that we have to try to help them create a better world for us. I know that's kind of pie in the sky sometimes, but I think that's what, when you think about educators, we're very idealistic, and that's part of our, I guess our skill set, that we kind of help frame what's best for kids. However, the great challenge for teachers is this. Teachers, it's what you want, it's like you drive, you have a curriculum, it's what the teacher says, right? It's about driving home content. However, the kids, what do they think? What do they want to do? And in between that intersection is the relevancy. And that's kind of like the sweet spot that we try to get and we talk about with teachers. How do we find that magical formula that balances what we say as adults, what they're interested in? Okay, and that's sort of the magic piece when you think about authentic learning. What's making it authentic? I know you have the content, you have a test coming up, but how do you get them engaged? How do you get them empowered? And that's sort of the magic piece of it. So ultimately, the goal that was established back in March with the Strategic Learning Plan Committee, one of the major goals is number one here, authentic learning. You want to develop innovative problem solvers, critical thinkers, effective communicators, strong collaborators. But again, this is different from last strategic plan. Apply their knowledge to navigate real world challenges, right? That's kind of the leap that didn't happen with the last plan, okay? So what we needed to do, what happened next is that, and this happened with every strategic plan goal, right? You had Now, steering committees look focused on this goal and saying, okay, what do we need to do to kind of actualize this? Our committee kind of came up with a framework. Our focus is at the bottom of the triangle, right? Really student passions, interests, and futures. How do we do that? How do we actualize that? How do we tap into that more? We thought, okay, we have to understand what authentic learning is, but to be able to really promote authentic learning, we thought as a strategic plan, we need to also provide them with the right amount of time and the right learning environments and spaces. Because if you think about this very simply, 40 minutes in a classroom in the high school, and I tell the teacher I want things authentic with the kids, that's a challenge, okay? So that's one of the things that was on our mind when we're saying, hey, we want learning to be more authentic. What's a district gonna do to try to provide that type of environment so it can make it a little easier, okay? The last strategic plan kind of didn't really touch on those things. So quickly, like relevant and authentic learning experiences for all students. I just had some nice pictures, which I'm not gonna get into, but many of those experiences that you see there, these teachers are gonna talk about it tonight, right? Again, think about engagement, think about student agency, think about their passions and looking at their interests and future, having more student choice. Okay, why is this subject important to me? Why do I need to learn that question? Every single one of us, back in high school, had that question, right? And then when your kids were going through school, and maybe they still are going through school, you ask them the same questions, right? Oh my God, this teacher's giving me this homework. I see this for my child. Why is this important? Like my daughter my daughter doesn't go to school here, but when she came home in 5th grade and it was like they were coloring pictures of the world and the oceans with crayons, I'm like, what makes this relevant, right? So I know we've been in that same type of situation. So again, we have 3 action steps. Number 1, explore new and advance previous efforts in providing relevant, authentic learning experiences for all learners. That's the first thing. And tonight, we're gonna share some of those previous experiences. The question for us, the challenge is how do we replicate these experiences beyond some of them, many of them are culminating activities into the learning experiences throughout the year. So it's not just like the last thing that they do. And again, that's not the case for every one of them, but part of the last strategic plan had a lot of emphasis on capstone projects, like in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade. Now, how do those performance assessments really relate to the rest of the school year? That's kind of our challenge. And things that we're gonna try to do, I'm not gonna go over every single one of these, but we need to develop a common language. What is authentic learning? We already have a nice framework called the Pelham Inquiry Cycle, which I know Tom Callahan and Maria Thompson, they've been working together in bridging this concept of inquiry and design thinking beyond just maybe science, but how this type of thinking and testing and designing, reflecting, sharing, prototyping, questioning, how can that happen in all the areas, not just, let's say, science research, right? So that's something we've been working on. Teachers have already been getting trained, but how can we exploit that to use it throughout all of the systems? We want to explore partnerships outside the school district. There's a performance assessment continuum, that's consortium out there that really looks at how do you get rid of region exams and have more performance-based assessments there instead to assess kids. That's an opportunity out there. We want to look at extending the 10th grade community project, from the community project in 8th grade in IB to the 10th grade project, which is a personal project with IB, the middle years program. That's a goal for us. We also are gonna look, this is a major thing we want to focus on, is looking at the 12th grade internship experience and seeing, researching and exploring how successful it is and whether we can recommend expanding it to all 12th graders some point. That's a goal for us because the second half of senior year, kids do question sort of the relevance and the learning that goes on. It's already happening in many other school districts. Why not Pelham? Okay. Use of time in schools. Again, we want to explore how time is used effectively and efficiently in our school district, right? The main thing we're going to do this year is that we're going to work with Dr. Michael Reddig. All the administrators are going to meet with him in November and also in December this year and begin the dialogue and discussion of looking at our schedules, elementary, middle school, and high school, looking at some other examples out there, at some point, have a better understanding as the leadership team of what the possibilities are, then have a larger group of stakeholders of students and teachers, board members, administrators, to kind of look at our schedules and decide what's the future of time use in our schools. And that's a major piece, I think, of trying to promote more authentic learning. And again, a lot of that deals with stakeholder feedback and understanding schedules that work, okay, and works for all our kids. And again, the third major piece of this is looking at space. I mean, you know, you probably get tired of me talking about this, but if you look at the classroom for the 1920s and you go upstairs and it looks a little bit like that now, right? That happens in every school across the country, no different in Pelham. Can we provide better environments, more flexible environments, more engaging environments for kids to, I mean, I know I just spoke with one of the board members recently about this. You know, the fact that movement, there's research saying that movement, physical movement for children and for adults helps brain development, it helps you think, helps you solve issues more, encourages you to kind of think differently than just being static. That's sort of the research behind it. So again, you know we have a team of stakeholders, the innovation committees that's looking into innovative classrooms. You know that the PEF has been very generous with us, that we're gonna have pilot classrooms in every school in the district, and we're flipping our library spaces in 3 of the elementary schools and the middle school to be these universal, I made this up, universal design, universal learning centers that it's more than just a library media center. The class can be brought in there and rearranged in different ways. You can have different types of activities and learning experiences for kids beyond just, let's say, taking out the book or just looking at research. We're very excited about that. We're hoping midway through the year, we're gonna have those actually come to fruition. And I know I'd like to thank the administrators and the teachers, the innovation committee has been involved with that, especially John Sabalos, who's been helping us out tremendously with that. And I think we have to understand, based on student feedback and looking at all our facilities, how we are providing those different environments for kids to try to encourage more different types of learning experiences. So again, our framework for our strategic plan, how do we encourage more student passions, interests, and futures? How do we capitalize on that? And by doing that, we really have to investigate how we're using time and space in our schools. So tonight, I have some connecting questions, because you're like, what is authentic learning? What does this mean, and why are we, or aren't we already doing that? Yes, but these are models, and we want to ask the teachers tonight, and I already, you know, I kind of prepared them for this. In what ways does your experience with students right now in your programs reflect authentic learning? Our new definition. But also, this is a good question, it's a very important question. How do we know this is successful? How do you measure it? Because it isn't quantifiable, right? It really isn't. It's qualitative, and we need to do a better job of kind of identifying, memorializing these experiences so we can actually show people and community members and board members and teachers with each other what type of learning, the process of learning that goes on, taping it, videotaping it very easily, and then we can catalog it and show you this is the type of experience kids are really presenting and sharing and learning from, so we can have good models. We don't currently really do that. There may be snippets, but we need to do that better. I'm gonna ask the teachers to really talk about, okay, they had this experience in the 8th grade community project. How did they demonstrate? How do you know that they learned? Okay, what made it successful? What were the indicators, right? What did you use a rubric? What does that look like? So I want to kind of turn it over, and we have a tremendous group. Science 21, Alicia Gallagher is going to talk to us about that wonderful program that's now in the 3rd grade. Adele Reynolds is here to talk about the Make a Change project in 5th grade. The 8th grade community project, Sarah Pinsker, is going to explain what that is and what that looks like in her experience. Megan Rice is going to share with us the docent project that's gone on with human rights class. In physics, we have Joe DeBello and Jason Lindley to talk about how they flipped over the Regents exam and changed it to a performance-based assessment. Greg Kopstein is going to talk about, I think, what you're really going to like, when they talk about personal finance. Sociology has definitely connected with that. Irene Gruber is going to share with us her wonderful and kind of gruesome digs that she does out there in the forensics class. And James Rogers is new teaching AP Computer Science. He's going to talk about really how he's changed it for us and what it looks like. And we're going to end it with Tom Callahan talking about a longstanding program for us in science research and how that's reflected. So first, let me move, because I don't get stuck back here, but we're going to ask the teachers to kind of share. And first, we're going to start with Science 21. All right, so Alicia, I'll do my Monty Hall routine. Okay. Alicia's going to share a little bit about Science 21 has now been the third year it's been in place.
So we're up to third grade? Yes.
So up to third grade.
So this year, so we've taken kind of an approach where we roll out Science 21 one year at a time. There's one year where, last year, where we rolled out first and second grade. So it's been 3 years so far, kindergarten, first and second, and this year's third grade.
And this has been reflected in the next generation science standards, design, engineering cycle. So Alicia's going to, kindergarten teacher has to talk a little bit about it.
So when I read the definition of authentic learning, I just can't help but think of the whole Science 21 program that I've been implementing now for the past 2 years, going into the third year. And I really do already on the 13th day of school have little scientists in my classroom, and they know it, and they come in the morning and ask, when is it time for science? But we solve every day, we solve real life problems. The program, Science 21 itself, focuses on life science, earth science, physical science, and engineering. In all of the units and all of the grades, K through 3 right now, all of the topics are real world things that the kids really understand and know about. For example, in kindergarten, the unit that we're in right now is what is weather. The second unit is forces and interactions of pushes and pulls. And the third unit is needs and wants. Now, on paper, you may not think that a kindergartner can explain real life situations or problems in all of those units, but they really can. And diving deeper, as we get deeper and deeper into the unit, that's when I can really tell as their teacher that they're understanding the content that I'm teaching them. For example, so at the end of the unit that I'm teaching right now, what is weather, the students will develop and design a project that will protect an ice cube from the sun. So they are using the design cycle, inquiry-based thinking, and they plan out and design and build, again, a project to protect an ice cube from the sun. So throughout the entire unit, they're learning, okay, the sun heats the earth. How does this affect me? How does this affect my life? So again, those real world problems, they're thinking about all of these things throughout their science lessons. I have students coming in the morning telling me what the degree is going to be today, because they told me that they asked their Alexa, what is the weather today, Alexa? So it's really fantastic that on the 13th day of school, I also have meteorologists coming in. And it's, so evaluating them at the end, Science 21 provides an opportunity at the end of each unit, more of a larger project where I really get to see, the teachers really get to see if they understand the concepts. And what's great is that throughout the unit, if you're noticing that they're really not getting it, the program offers differentiated instruction for different for children who are struggling with anything, and they offer so many different opportunities that promote STEAM, including the arts, to extend your lessons as well. So at the end of the lessons, it says if you want to keep going with this lesson, you can extend it by doing this activity. So it's great that it offers teachers the opportunity to really keep moving forward with whatever they're learning. Another great thing about this program is that it really promotes the NGSS standards and coding and engineering. And as you know, last year, the Pelham Education Foundation granted us a $20,000 grant for all 4 elementary schools, where we have robots that the students can use from grades kindergarten to 5th grade and even hire. I told some of the high school teachers that they can borrow them if they want. We're coding in kindergarten, and so those 21st century, what you had put up on the board before, those jobs that are lacking in our country, it's again the 13th day of school, and we've already done coding in kindergarten. So there are so many different real world opportunities and real world problems that we've already solved, and it's only day 13.
Thank you. Another major project that we've seen out of for the last strategic plan, I mentioned those capstones, is Make a Change project. And there's a lot of work that went into this. We have training with Giselle Martin-Kniep, and she is a doctor who talks about really creating specific assessments for kids. And, she kind of raked us over the coals in terms of whether this is really authentic and what type of assessments, the rubrics. But what came out of it really some good work. But we kind of made it our own. So Del Brown's going to talk about that 5th grade project, which culminates with all the schools and all the children throughout Powell.
The math project, we call it, Make a Change, is a capstone project. And it really addresses real world problems because the 5th graders, all 4 schools, in the middle of the year we start talking about activists and agents for change. And in our research unit, the students do some research about an activist. And then by the end of the year, they become activists themselves. And we ask them at the local level to think about what can be changed or improved to make their elementary school better. And they come up with a wide array of ideas. And they begin to mimic the work of professionals, which is in the definition of authentic learning. They actually write proposals for this work. They do the research. They interview people on costs and time. They have extensive teamwork. They divide the workload. And they're learning all of those types of things and using all the skills that they've learned throughout the year, like Google Slides, research, problem solving, and they then present to an authentic audience. And we've had superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, PTA members, other administrators, Board of Ed members have come. We've had the cafeteria lady, I don't know her name, the technology department, the person who runs the honors program in the high school, our custodial staff. We've had a lot of people come and listen to various presentations. And it's really great because they're in charge of deciding what it is that they want to present and propose. And they decide how they're going to collect the data, how they're going to represent the data. They decide how to delegate the work within their group, who their stakeholders really are, and who needs to be interviewed to get information. They decide the best way to present it. Is it a poster? Is it a diorama? Is it Google Slides? They do their own timeline and pace their work. So they are just so engaged every day. And I know Dr. Champ was in the hallway one day. She got like accosted by people who were working on their math projects. And she just answered questions and really gave them the information that they needed. And they put together this whole thing. And it's evaluative because the stakeholders who come and listen to the presentations provide feedback. We have a forum that they give them feedback on their ideas and on their presentation skills. We have a rubric that we use that grades their proposal and if their presentation met requirements. And it's also a matter of those stakeholders really showing an interest in their project. We have had at Siwanoy backboards put on the basketball hoops so that the balls don't go onto Manor Lane all the time. We've had mirrors put in the bathrooms. We've had classrooms painted in all 4 schools where all the paint was chipping. The worst 5 classrooms in each building were painted. We've gotten more Chromebooks. we have, believe it or not, before it was actually done, the kids came up with the idea of rotating the band schedule so they didn't always miss the same thing. They also thought of eco-friendly lunch trays before we actually had them. Hutchinson had a great use the path, well, when there was a path, and that was really successful it was supported. And there's just been so many ideas, some, only a few have been implemented, but it's really interesting to see what the kids want. They ask, the past 4 years, I think we've been doing this academy period for elementary school has come up. Dividers in the urinals in the boys' bathroom. They want privacy. Reading spaces and little nooks in the library, which are innovative furniture, hopefully, in those classrooms. Mindfulness in the classroom, a rock garden, more whiteboards, things that are really important to them. So we're really pleased with this program. And yes, it's a capstone, but it's really, they love doing it and they learn a lot.
And the kids did support the turf field. That's what I learned that
Yeah.
day. They did all the research. They want to turf everything.
So similarly from the last strategic plan, the concept of capstones and the IB program. The middle school years has been very influential in grades 6 through 8, and part of the requirements have a community project. Sarah's going to talk about that experience, and you'll see similarities along the way.
So in 8th grade, students complete the community project. It starts in about the beginning of November and goes until the beginning of June. So they're really working on this project throughout every single unit that they're doing. They work in groups to address a real world problem, and in doing so, they're able to not only research a problem, but work with professionals in that field. Students are engaging in authentic writing, so that way they can communicate with professionals in the field. They're also writing little scripts so they can have phone conversations, and for many of them, they're learning how to do that for the first time with professionals in the field. Then they are sharing this information with those that they've worked with, as well as their peers during the presentations here in Alumni Hall and during Expo Night with the entire community. In the past, some community projects have included students research the need for and how to properly construct a greenhouse for Pelham Middle School. This was on the property last year. Students researched the need for growth in the bee population. They sold reusable bags and provided information about bee awareness and used the money for the sale to build a bee garden in Pelham. Another group collaborated with the Foundations of Learning class as a way to build a bridge between learning communities, and they engaged with the FOL class during their lunch period and assisted during education activities. There have been many drives throughout the years, sports equipment drives, as well as clothing drives to provide for neighborhoods in need as well. There's a lot of research that goes into it, a lot of student work in terms of being able to prove that their project is necessary for the community or surrounding communities. In order to evaluate students, there are actually 4 IB rubrics that students are evaluated with. The first is the investigation rubric. This is determining that their cause is a real world problem and they've done the research to be able to prove it. The second is the planning rubric. That's how well they're working with professionals and the authentic writing experience that they are engaging in. The third is taking action. This is the actual discourse and social learning process that students participate in, what they're doing with these professionals and what action they're actually taking. The third rubric is the reflection rubric. This is the metacognition that students are taking part in. They need to think about their project, their thinking, and their learning, reflect upon it, and actually have a conference with me in order to determine that they're able to go through and think about each step of their process.
Thank you. And Megan's human rights course explores it in What grade level, 10th grade level?
9th through 12th.
9th through 12th grade. So, her approach looked at the Holocaust and trying to make it more of a, I think, meaningful experience for the kids.
So I'll touch on, so the human rights class is it's an elective in the high school. It's open to 9th through 12th grade students. And it's founded on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, created by the United Nations. And so the first unit is just going over the historical roots of that and the context which it comes from. And so one part of that really is a deep dive into the Holocaust. And so this past spring, the course was offered in the spring semester. What was so nice is it lined up to when in the 8th grade, there's a Holocaust survivor who books and speaks, and you reunite. And so the students were able to, with partnership with the Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center in Westchester County, use their boards. They have like professional museum boards and create a museum exhibit for the students. So they did research on their particular issue or topic. So from the roots of anti-Semitism to the various types of camps and what happened after and creation of different types of what's the mean to be a refugee in the camps. And then from there, they were presenting to the other students and sort of explaining the different steps. And that's just one project of many different projects within the class. The students really get to choose the content of the course once we go beyond that section, where it's really based on what the current events are in the current issues. So every year it's a brand new course because it's what's going on in the news and what's important to the students. And so in the past we've covered Syrian refugee crisis in depth, and they've created a whole day for the rest of the students to really come and experience and learn about what's happening in Syria. 2 years ago, big focus was in Myanmar and the persecution of the Rohingya. And we've done a bunch of different types of activities at the end of every unit. So every 2 weeks or so, we're sort of switching topics, and the students do things like letter writing campaigns. They've had to research a particular NGO and then apply for a grant to help get their funding, like mock grants, and sort of see where is the money to fund for this particular organization. We've had lots of different guest speakers come in over the years. Most recently, last year, we spoke with a director of a movie called Girl Rising. It's a documentary on girls' education in the world. And so she was able to do a Skype class with us, which was really nice that she took the time out for that. Various social media campaigns where they learn how to use Instagram and other types of platforms for good. And so they'll create different types of how to make an effective visual image and then project it there. And then in the end, as their final project, which actually takes a good few months, they each take on their own issue that they sort of have been maybe tracing through different current events, and they create a project for themselves of how to make change. So in the past, we've had fundraisers, feminine hygiene products, and a drive for that for various shelters in the area. They've interviewed different organizations and created op-eds for it and sent it to different newspapers for publication. They've organized events with guest speakers, creating a petition and sending it to the proper audience. That's a big challenge, is finding out who do you address certain issues to. They've even started clubs at the school and sort of carried on that mission. So the course as a whole, in particular in small areas, have lots of different opportunities.
Thank you. Let me jump out of order and give the great compliment. Talk about sociology, and this is intriguing because a lot of the feedback I got from parents talk about personal finance, and I think Rick's experience kind of taps into that.
Good evening. So sociology is the study of human relationships. So a great capstone, and it was actually an acronym to start with for Childhood and Adulthood Project, which is a bad name for it, so it turned into capstone. What this does is take theories and makes it into a real life application. And it starts, if you will, just imagine students going through 30 years in a month. This is a month-long monitored project. There are very few restrictions. So everybody starts with picking a field. Any field that they want, they're interested in studying in real life. From there, they look at programs, college, vocational, whatever it is that would help them pursue that field. And the fields run the gamut. From there, they go to that college, and if higher education or other schools or programs are there, then that's what they would pursue. And then they create a mock resume. Here they're looking at what their life should look like when they're getting ready to pursue that career. What their internship should be, or what kind of backgrounds they need, or what kind of programs or other certificates they would want. After that, they do a mock interview with a faculty member in the school, could be an administrator, or a teacher. Many of the teachers in this room have actually done this. And we pair every student with a faculty member with experience in that field. And they prepare for the mock interview, they look at what skills they need for a mock interview, and they go in there. And with the faculty member, they treat it like it's a real interview, and then afterwards they go through a reflection, talk about what went well, what they should practice, maybe it is a speaking skill, maybe it's they need more information on that career choice. So those are the professional skills that kick off this project. After that, we focus on financial skills. So they either get their first choice, or perhaps a second choice, and then they look at salaries anywhere in the country, and then specifically in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, somewhere commutable to Westchester, and I'll come back to that in a second. They negotiate their salaries, high, middle, low. They look at benefits, percent increases. It's all an open conversation, so it's based on their personal research on that field. So if there's a class of 28 11th to 12th graders, now there are 56 points of differences, maybe even 72 points of differences, depending on what their choice is. After that, they look at taxes, bills, utilities, what needs to go into all that money that they get, and it's usually with a preset tax bracket that we looked at with the 2019 tax bracket, just to give a little point of reference, so everybody's on some kind of even keel there. After that, they look at a house on the market on Zillow or a similar site, usually Zillow, and they look at mortgages, whether or not they can afford it, based on their monthly and over a 30-year career. So sometimes they think they want this house, and then they look at it in a long scheme of things, and it doesn't quite pan out. But they look at the towns that they're living in, they look at the community culture of those towns, and the only restriction that's really there is it has to be in Westchester. The reason for that is because of all of the taxes and school districts and things. It's just, if you let them go out too far out, it could be a problem. However, last year negotiated to switch to Westchester, Rockland, or Putnam, and we let them do that. So this project, like I said, it is a month-long project, but this is the 10th, I call it generation of this. So every previous generation changes the nature of the project, and they add components to it. For instance, first generation never had a job interview. So these are totally student-driven over time, and it does evolve. After the financial skills, then we hit the life skills. So they've got a job, they've got a home, they pick a child, they raise the child. Every day is 2 years. So they're raising a child for 9 school days, but it's essentially 18 years. And through that, they look at the things of raising a child. They could have twins, that has come up a few times. It's through random draw, except one year there were 6 sets in there. So we had many sets of twins. I wanted to see what would happen. So they go through life choices. My sister was pregnant with twins at the time. So so they look at life choices, decisions. They pair with Mr. Marcucciolio's psych class and look at types of parenting and consequences. They look at curveballs. There could be anything from a home that needs repair to a trip abroad. They look at the reasonings for sending a child abroad with them, going to another country, or perhaps to go visit relatives somewhere else. We look at socialization, the arts, sports, life decisions that go into that. And then after that, their child is 18 years old, and they look at planning for college, dorm room shopping, the experience of shopping around. So if you will, the students are 16, 17, 18 years old, and they're pretending to be parents looking at their child's colleges. It changes the lens a little bit, and it allows them to do that. The way that technology is incorporated here, it's not an add-on, it's a tool. So it used to be tracking money on pen and paper. Now they use Google Sheets and Excel. We use Google Maps and tools so they can plan their commutes and commuting costs, gas, things like that. Mr. Savalas came in and worked with our mapping, so we appreciated that, and it added a different dimension. It's one thing to think about a commute, it's another thing to see it and traffic. They look at managing screen time for themselves and for their child. They look at presenting in a variety of ways, casting for instance, but their final project, the very last piece of this, is they're dropping their child off at college and they reflect on it. And they can choose any medium that they want. And these go from scrapbooks to Google Slides presentations, it could be a video montage. Vlogging is now in. We've done a few vlogs. One was an hour-long vlog. Every day they would take a few minutes to vlog, and it was incredible. They share these. They've also done creative writing, children's books, and you name it, they've done it. And then they culminate, this is new from last year, they film advice for the next generation of sociology students. Things that went well for them, things that didn't, advice that they might have, things to look into that maybe they missed, and they look back and like, man, I wish I did that. So this is totally flexible. We evaluate as we go with check-ins, the faculty interviews, checking their finances to make sure they don't go into debt, which sometimes happens, but then it's a quick course correction. And just advice from people in the community and the school. These are teachers and administrators who have lived it, and now they can help our next group of young learners do it. And I think that's a great skill.
That's great. Let's move on to physics. And what's interesting about physics is that a few years ago there was a push to try to do something different than just keep on taking these REIS exams and having our kids culminate their experience with a REIS exam. A lot of that really is precipitated by a bad experience with a REIS exam when they change it at the state level and all of a sudden kids don't do as well. That's kind of the impetus, but really it was about giving kids and students an opportunity to do something different and more authentic with kids. So.
Hey everybody. This is weird sitting down doing this. Okay, so we had the great experience to get rid of the REIS exam, and I think for us is how do we take our kids who do so much testing, and instead of having them sit in the gym for 3 hours and tell us they know something, like do something actual and real. So when physics department sat down to really think like what would be a good experience, and we have to be content driven, so that's be a little bit tighter. So we came up with this project that's called the Scrambler, and the basic idea, if you don't know, is kids build a vehicle that has to have a stopping mechanism, and we put an egg on the front, and then we have a wall in the hallway, and it rolls down a ramp and has to stop before it hits the wall, otherwise you break the egg. And what's interesting about the project itself is it brings a lot of physics concepts in, right? So we're talking about torque and friction and all that, but I think the most important we talk about authentic learning for the students, like what's the real thing is, they come to me, right, or Mr. DeBella or Mr. Shambari, and they're like, so, this is what's going on. And I'm like, uh-huh. I'm like, I don't know how to fix this. I'm like, okay, I don't know how to fix that either. It's like your car's turning left every time, and I also don't have the answers. And I think that's really interesting for a lot of our students because they have this experience in school where they're like, oh, I didn't get this question right, I just gotta learn that content, and it's an easy pathway to success. When we talk about authentic learning, like that's not how life works, and that's not how the project works either. Like, no one knows a direct pathway, and sometimes you just sort of like cyclically loop on yourself because you fix one thing and you realize you broke like 4 or 5 other things. And that's the real authentic part of that experience for us is that they're getting used to like, it's really hard and it's a struggle and people don't have the answers. And you Google it and that still don't have the answers. And sometimes we just don't have good solutions. And getting that experience. And then the other part for us is like, how do we evaluate that? Right? Because we still want grades and all that. So how do we know that they're learning? And for us, the big part, you know, with Dr. Callan, we're working a lot with their writing, but also their reflection. So at the end of the project, do we want the cars to work? Yes, mainly because I don't want to clean up that much egg in the hallway, but also, in the end, it's if it didn't work, why? So are you reflecting on it? And when you do reflect on it, what can you tell us about the process? Like, did you learn from this? And what are we getting out of it from the students? And my students last year gave me the opportunity to make videos, or they write lab reports as well. And it's really that reflection where you get to see a lot of the growth from them, where they're like, wow, I have to learn and try. This was tough. And you get to see that sort of growth throughout the month that they work on this project. So that's so the authentic piece for us is like, life is messy, and there's no like, I just follow the steps. And I think that that's sort of our authentic piece that's happened sort of in our capstone. Joe?
So I also teach science research as well. And that has been an absolutely crazy experience. I think I've been doing it for 3 years. I don't really know because it just never ends. But kind of when I started that, pretty much at the same time, we got rid of the regents in physics. And I was the regent physics teacher for a long time. So kind of like switching over to that, I really had an opportunity to take like what I've learned in science research, which I thought it was interesting that it came up there. How science research, like, can we just take science research and apply it to everything? And in teaching it, it's like, it's really just, you know, real life. That's what science research is. So I've been kind of bringing that into physics and kind of doing a lot of research and trying to bring some authentic learning experiences
into our regular physics class as well, just kind of on a day-to-day basis. So you've kind of heard like all of these big culminating things, but I want to give you guys some insight onto kind of like what an authentic learning experience would look like on a day-to-day basis. So like one of the things that has kind of been huge in education for, I think, forever, or at least since I've been doing it, it's been like backwards design, focusing on looking at those standards, right, and then designing your instruction around them. And I think authentic learning takes it kind of a step further. So when we switched from the Regents, I was looking at kind of all those same standards, but now what are the real world applications of every one of those standards? So one of the things we do is talk about electricity and electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic induction and solenoids and things like that. And then I was like, well, where does this come into play in your real life? And it's in your house. So one of my favorite questions to ask the kids is we calculate how much energy does a light bulb use in like 1 minute. And then every kid's like, my parents yell at me all the time for having my lights on, which I'm sure you guys have done. And then we actually calculate it's like 18 cents if you leave like all of the lights on in your house for like a day. It's like literally nothing. So, right. Well, what I think, and what I've done is kind of sent them on a scavenger hunt to look in their house and read all of the labels on all of their devices and think about the different circuit breakers in their house and the different circuits and apply that to our circuit stuff. And what I have them do is write in the end, like Jason was saying, like a big part of how we assess these authentic learning experiences is through writing, and I have them write up a plan for how they can reduce the energy usage in their house, which a lot of times is just turn the TV off when you're not watching, so in case you were curious. So yeah, we see a lot of like the effects of this in writing, but I think the biggest thing is we see it also anecdotally from students. I can't tell you the number of times when somebody's like, what do you do for a living? Like I teach physics, they're like, oh, physics, I learned physics, 9.81, right? Which is the acceleration due to gravity. It's like literally everybody, it's crazy. And then now I'm starting to see a lot of students who are like, oh, physics, I remember that, my egg drop. I wish I did this one thing. And they're remembering this egg drop process where we, drop these devices out of the window. Our custodial staff hates it because there's eggs everywhere. But it's like a week of dropping these things and going through that authentic learning process to build something that works. So I'm seeing it both in the writing, but also just kind of anecdotally and seeing our students be really excited about it.
Thank you. Have Irene talk about, my first TIG actually was last year. And it was fascinating, right? Because the amount of planning that goes into it is just amazing. So I encourage all of you, if you haven't seen that dig in the spring, please do, because it's kind of scary as well.
Hi, good evening. Before I talk about the dig, I do have some other opportunities that we do in forensic science. I have two of them that I want to share because I feel as though they're not really two separate entities or two separate things that we do, but they're really part of the continuum of the professional training that we do in forensic science, and that's part of the whole process. So I've done some workshops and courses, and most of the workshops and courses I've gone to are not with teachers. They're with detectives and police officers, and I'm usually not, I'm the standout. I'm not, the same as everyone else, but from the training that I've gotten, I've learned so much from them. So it was a great opportunity. So I had this opportunity to what we call blood school. So it was a blood spatter pattern analysis workshop, actually a course, a 40-hour course, and a crime scene reconstruction course. And from those two courses, I was able to put together a project. The students get a set of true crime scene photos. Using witness statements and the blood spatter analysis, the students are asked to create a timeline of the events prior to the witness finding the victim. The students develop a series of fact beyond change pieces of information on Post-it notes to help them process the scene only through these photos. So fact beyond change would be something like, there's a footprint in the blood. Therefore, the blood was there first, and then the foot went on top. So that's a fact beyond change, that what came first and the whole layering process. And that helps them see what was first, what was next. So little things like that. So the blood spatter expert, the analyst is not usually at the scene. So that's what makes it a really difficult job. They actually look at just photos. And when I was at blood school, I saw the stack of photos was literally about a foot high. That's how, I mean, you know, not before the whole digital process. So it was a stack like this. And they had to go through every single one of those. We don't have that many. We have maybe 20. So they go through those. After the groups, they look at these pictures, they discuss the scene, they create this timeline for both before and after the victim is found. So as a class, they review some of the assumptions that they made. Even though the evidence does direct them towards finding the correct conclusion, a lot of times they don't get it right. And that is expected. I expect that. And that's mainly because they don't have the experience in the crime scene processing. The assessment that they have is not just graded on right or wrong. It is mostly based on how well did they work on solving this problem. So there's a little bit of frustration, and there's a little bit of excitement because they do want to get the right answer. They do want to find out what happened. Though they review the inaccuracies, we talk about what were the problems, where did they go astray, and they carefully follow those. And they recognize that if they were a professional in the field and they didn't get it right, either they're setting someone free who's guilty, or they're sending an innocent person to prison. So they do see the real significance on why this is important. And they realize also this is not a show. This is not 22 minutes or 45 minutes in a program, that it really takes a lot of work. And a blood spatter expert really has to rely on what the witnesses will tell them and what the pictures are telling them. And that's how they learn what all of the patterns really mean. When we do the CSI project, which follows the blood spatter photos, they create their own crime scenes. The other students from another group will solve their crime, and they get it right because they learned that there are certain things that they have to look at, certain things they have to check out. They have to look at background, they have to look at cell phone records, they have to look at computer history. It's not just, okay, what's at the scene, this is all I see. No, they have to go investigate further. So, towards the end, we then do the anthropology field study, which we all call the dig. So, I had done workshops on burial and surface recovery. And basically take some plastic skeletons and bury them in the parking lot above Friendship Field around March or April. Yes, people do question, and people have seen me do it and question, what am I doing? And I do tell them, and I do carry my ID with me, just so people know. So each burial, each body has a story. They have clothing, they have evidence, there's possibly a weapon, there's an ID or something that can help them ID the person. They have sometimes a backpack or a purse. There's a story. So what the students do is they process this crime scene. So what are they doing? They dig in dirt with trowels, not with shovels. So they're not really digging, they're really scraping. They sift through the dirt. They then have someone taking notes on measurements, taking notes on the process. They have someone doing a sketch. They have someone else doing the photographs. They have an evidence log. They have a photo log. So there's about 10 to 11 people on a team. There's about 6 to 7 bodies up there for the project. When they're done, they get everybody together, all these different jobs. They have to talk about what their experience was. And then they put together what did they find? From that evidence, what do they think the cause of death is? And they get it. They get it right. I mean, I don't think I've had anyone not get it. And I think the best compliment I think we got was 2 years ago, one of our students, as her final project, she worked with a New York State trooper to study cadaver dogs. She was part of the canine unit. And she came, our state trooper came to talk to our group of students about cadaver dogs and do an actual demonstration for us. As she was leaving, she was watching the students set up, putting the tarps out and the sifters out and the trowels, and she commented, "This is exactly how we do it in the field." So that's what I want them to get. I want them to get that professional training, and hopefully that's what they're here for. Thank you.
James is going to talk about computer science course. He's new to this course, and there's been some changes to it, and we thank him for taking this role on.
So yes, I'm rather new, so I'm looking forward to learning all of this as it's going along. But really, the course is all about teaching the students how the internet works, their information is processed over the internet, how applications, free or not, are taking their data and possibly using them in good or, unfortunately, probably bad ways. How big data is influencing decision-making on modeling, and the students are going to be taking a look at the strengths and weaknesses of those things. There's a few major projects we're going to be looking with. One is the students are going to pick their own computing innovation, and they're going to have to do research into how it takes in data, what it does with it, impacts that it has on society, culture, the economy, both in a good and a negative way. And the students have to work on finding current and modern sources, so they have to work on their researching skills. The part that I'm really excited about is when we get into our programming and coding. I think this is really where the students have open-ended objectives. They're going to have certain things. Your program has to contain animation, it has to contain a function, it has to contain some programming blocks. How they want to take that, what direction they want to go is completely up to them. And the students are going to learn how to use whiteboard diagrams and pseudocode to share and exchange information without blatantly saying, no, this is how you write this loop. So there's going to be working on how to collaborate with one another in a professional manner without just blatantly telling each other how to do things. And I know I'm personally really excited to explore what not just Scratch can do with teaching them the basic logic of programming, but then getting a little further into C and Python where they're learning the technical syntax that they're going to be using. And a big aspect of this is the students will have their programs tested against like 7 or 8 different checks, and depending upon whether they hit the checks, that tells them what their percent is. And after they have their grades checked, they have the opportunity to recognize what went right, what went wrong, make revisions, find and fix their bugs, and resubmit for full credit. So we're trying to give the students the ability to persevere and be resilient in spite of, well, you don't really know what's going on, which is what I've been dealing with and cursing at my computer a lot when I can't get my computer working and can't find my bug. So I think it'll be fun.
And I know I want to end this with science research. Tom's going to talk a little bit about it, but it's been a long-standing program. It's been around, obviously, in not just in this district, but in many districts in the county and in the country. But maybe Tom can talk a little bit about maybe how it's changed and how it's influenced beyond just science research at the high school level and just that science department.
So I have a history teaching science research, and one of the things you realize when you're in education long enough is when people want to come and see what you're doing in a school that's innovative, creative, and really does help foster problem solving, they tend to look for these kinds of classes. And these kinds of classes are also the classes that are the hardest to get metrics from, because all the metrics are really qualitative. And we do have lots of reflections and things like that, but as someone who taught science research, what you realize is these are the experiences that if you want your kids to, when they encounter a problem, not give up, persevere, and not look for a prescribed solution. So where's the study guide before the test? because the test is the study guide redone so that you can get 100. So that will give people certain experiences, and you don't want to negate those experiences because content is important and having context is important. But if you want a student, when they encounter an original problem, to be able to solve that original problem without having a prescription, these are the types of courses that help them to do that. So when they go to college and we're not around, and they're looking to solve problems like, my financial aid didn't go through, and you guys are a couple hours away, we want them to be able to have skills to do things like that. And these are the types of classes that really do that kind of problem solving. So, to Dr. Garcia's point, science research for me, and I think for our department, and really for all of our schools and all the departments, is an impetus for, okay, our kids are saying in science research, they get to find a problem that they're passionate about solving, and we tell them, okay, go solve that problem. Go find mentors, we'll help guide you, collect data, solve the problem, write it up, and communicate it to us. And the thing that we find is, more often than not, it doesn't go well. And they have to find another way to solve the problem. And they're not, when you've taught science research, they're not prepared for the problem that doesn't go well. And that's what these courses tend to do better than any of the other courses that we might be used to. So science research for us has been an impetus for change in a lot of ways. How do we teach kids how to engage in a problem-solving process instead of just regurgitate something they've heard already? So how do we get them, when they encounter something, to say, okay, what's this problem? What do I know about it? What can I find out about it? How can I design an answer or a solution, or at least collect data about it, reevaluate that, and keep moving forward to solve that problem? And that's really what authentic learning is. It equips our students with the ability to solve a problem they haven't encountered yet, instead of just presenting the same problem over and over and over again, year after year, with the same old study guides. So if you're asking us, how does science research, I guess, give us a lens into that? That's where we've done that for years. And the question we've all asked is, how do we give every student across all disciplines that experience? How do we harness their passion to solve a problem, to ask them to engage in that process, go out and solve that problem, and tell us how they did it, reflect on it, and whenever they encounter a problem again they're passionate about, to continue a process like that and engage in a process like that. So for us, we found that in Science 21, and Alicia spoke about that more eloquently than I could. But we're looking to expand that into all of our elementary grades where there's a lot of project-based learning. Physics, what we did is our kids were taking AP exams and then sitting for a Regents exam that was easier. And we were like, what are we doing? Why are we prepping for a test that's easier than one of the ones they've already taken? Why don't we do something authentic so the kids can show us what they actually know? And then go out into either AP Physics 2 or into college and use those skills somewhere else. So, and we do that in forensics as well. So you've heard that, and that really goes across whether it's the Make a Change project in 5th grade, like what's the issue in our school that we want to solve, how do we engage in a process to solve it, and how do we do, so you saw the responses to the survey, how do we present that to an authentic audience in writing or orally? So how do we take that science research model that we have embraced and really enjoyed in our district for many years, and how do we make sure every kid, K through 12, has experiences like that in all of their classes? And that's really where all of our conversations have been, and why we chose authentic learning as one of the 3 goals in the strategic plan. So science research for us has been kind of an impetus for that work, and we really drew the inquiry cycle that we're using from the work in science research, from some of the IB work that Sean did a tremendous job with, rolling out in the middle schools with Ms. Sabia, and then also working with Dr. Thompson to make sure an inquiry process will work not only in the sciences, but in the humanities as well. We've had lots of collaborations and initial discussions about that as well. So you can see that, you can kind of see that process in everything that was presented tonight, and that's what we're looking to harness.
So, it sounds, I mean, I want to thank the teachers for coming, but I want to be a student at every one of their classes. So that's one thing. But as one thing you should notice, and you may realize, is the common thread among all of these experiences is that they're not ending in a Regents exam, right? So if you ask me, well, Steve, well, that sounds great, but what's the next step? The challenge is, how do we replicate these experiences in those classes which are traditionally taught towards the culminating activity, which is the standardized exam. And I think that is something that we need to do a better job on. And the two areas that we really want to talk about really is about how do we use this time and also the types of spaces that we have in our classrooms, but how do we use our experts here in the district to help train our teachers to take those risks and to find out those areas that the kids can learn more deeply and more authentically, even if it's a U.S. history class, right? Even if it's, an 8th grade math class, even if it's a living environment class, even if it's a 3rd grade class. That's where our gap is, and we recognize that. And I think that's sort of the strategy we're trying to lay out, that we can, in the next 5 years, to really integrate those experiences more deeply into the classes beyond what you see here tonight. And that's, I think, one of the major challenges that we do have, but I think that knowing that we do have experts in our district, and they've already started doing this, we've kind of flipped professional learning around, not bringing consultants, but really have our own teachers teach each other as really a good model, and they've really embraced that. And it's really the leadership team that's kind of helped shepherd that along. So that's just kind of one aspect of it. But still, the other piece is we need to memorialize this, right? Because you asked, we've said already it's not quantifiable, but if these experiences are happening, it's maybe not just showing the end of the MAC project, but how do we video or how do we record the learning process that's going on, not just the end, but what's happened in the middle, and that there's some sort of, as you mentioned, a blog about that experience that then we can showcase, saying this is what authentic learning is, and it's not just a test that happened at the end of the semester. And we haven't really done that in different avenues. That's just something else we've been thinking about as well. But I know we've been talking a lot after, and I'm sure you have questions, but we're open to any questions, and we can have a little bit more of a dialogue if needed.
I have a question.
Please.
So I thought it was all amazing, thank you. And I really like that you started with the feedback, because I think it definitely was familiar to those of us that sat on the strategic planning committee. So I think these things, kind of keep coming up again and again, and particularly the tough conversations one. So Megan, I had a question for you, because human rights, I would think, might bring up some tough conversations. So did they, and did they come up, and how did you manage them, and what did you learn about that?
Yes, they come up
Sure.
every day.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is establishing norms from the very beginning about what's expected in the class and how do we respect and how do we understand different opinions. And a lot of times it's elective, so it's self-selecting. So a lot of times students all come in with one perspective. So I always try and make sure that there's wide-ranging views and we get exposed to multiple points of view and sort of understand the whole issue. And I emphasize that, okay, well, what's the other side? Why would that be? Because if not, we can have this civil dialogue. And there's various routines depending on what we're doing, and protocols that that you sort of look up and you read on. And Teaching Tolerance provides a lot of really good resources for that. And also, I can't remember it's Facing City.
Facing history.
Facing History. Facing History also has really good standards. And so the first few weeks of the course it's almost like team building exercises to really help build a community of respect and trust among one another, and sort of understand that we also come from our own perspectives and we see from where we stand. And then from there, understand that other people are going to see from a different place. But yes.
Thank you.
So I would agree with Steve, I'd love to be a student in all of your classes, so I know we're not supposed to just show up in the buildings, but if you see me in the back of your classrooms, you just entice me, so, in my spare time. But anyhow, something that Joe said is what resonated with me when I heard all of this the other day and heard you speak again tonight, that I think that what makes each of these experiences so special is I think these are the ones that the students will remember when they reflect 10 years down the road on their experience here. They'll remember what they learned and they'll remember that experience. And I think that's a great challenge for all of us as a district, is to create more of those experiences for our students. And to recognize we do have the challenge of the state testing, but there's gotta be a balance between the two, I think, you know. I think we're setting ourselves up for a great higher standard, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, not all of it, because some of these programs, again, were long-standing, but many of these experiences really, I think, were influenced from like the last plan in itself. And again, it's really kind of understanding how we can then take it from the experience we've had now and really expand on it. And I think the challenge we have is, like, you know, we're still, as I was with Maria today, as the teachers in Frosted Hill are being trained in you know, the Writers' Workshop model, right? So, you know, we're still doing that work as well, right? There's still, you know, Science 21 training we started a few years ago. Yes, it's now expanded to 3rd grade, but we have a new literacy consultant. We're working with Teachers College now, which is really the preeminent organization for balanced literacy in the world. You know, math has not changed. We're still moving ahead with our math program. And so even though, you know, we're trying to find those avenues for more authentic learning experiences, but, you know, as I think a lot of the feedback we got from parents, you know, we don't want to go as far where we're straying away from, you know, losing teaching kids grammar, right? We still need to teach them how to write. And there's still, I know we say the basics, but how do we blend it together, right? Are we building the right foundations at the elementary level, moving it forward to the middle school level, so that when kids then do move on to high school, that, you know, we can even branch out further in their experiences. But again, there's some really, I know that our teachers here, you know, we're kind of showcasing their work at celebrations, really more than anything else, but I know there's also other experiences, right, that's happening in individual classrooms. Maybe certain schools have different things going on, especially at the elementary level, which are maybe different from each other, which are also like a little bit more engaging and authentic. And again, the other evaluation, if you ask, like, well, how do we know? It's really a contingent upon the leadership team as we observe teachers in the classroom observation process, whether it's formal, whether it's informal, when we're walking by the classroom or in the hallway, or we're invited to come in, that, you know, we ask these questions in post-observations conferences. You know, how does this address more authentic learning experiences for kids? You know, in what ways can you take that experience you had or that unit and change it so it's just not an assessment at the end of the quarter, that is an exam, but how can you make it so it's more of a performance-based experience? That's really contingent upon the leadership team, and we need some training ourselves to make sure that we understand what authentic learning is, in our definition, and then asking those questions of the teachers and helping them out and point them in the right direction along the way. And that's part of the evaluation process, as really anything we do in education.
I was just gonna echo a little bit of what Jess said, because my kids have actually taken a bunch of these classes, and the things that I've heard about the most as a parent are the projects that you talked about. Those are the things the kids wrestle with when they're at home, and they're proud to talk about. My daughter had a baby in Mr. Kopstein's class. That was not a happy moment for me. She did learn from it. So I hear about it as a parent because my kids are telling me, but maybe something that we could work on as a district is providing feedback to parents so that they know that these things are going on. When you get a report card, you have no idea that your kid maybe had some exposure to how to do their taxes, and maybe some of the feedback we get from parents would change if they had a little more insight into some of these projects.
I want to piggyback on that, because I've had parents say to me, well, if my kid's not in the science research program, then, you know, what are they getting out of this? You know, what, they're not in the, you know, they're not with the cool kids. You know, what are they getting? You know, how does the program, and that's what, hold on. And tonight I learned what they were getting. So I have an answer for that. And I appreciate the conundrum of trying to bring this I don't know, I don't want to call it philosophy, but it almost is, into other subject areas. You know, it doesn't apply itself as well to AP history. I think that's a good example. I remember my AP history class, and it was not about projects. But I got a lot of insight tonight into being able to answer those kinds of questions, because it has been put to me. And it's not, you know, it goes to the equity issue and, you know, kids who are, you know, in AP classes versus not AP classes, are they challenged as much? All those kinds of questions. And if we're trying to create a vision for how these things are being taught, then we can say, well, that's what we're going for.
And so that, there are possibilities, right? There are opportunities there. It's really contingent upon us to kind of help shepherd that into other classes, right? And, you know, what's nice about much of what we learned about and we saw tonight is that they're not, let's say, the honors or the AP class. Yes, one thing about science research is that and I've said this to Tom, is that I've seen an expansion, which is good. It's beyond, like I was a history major, right? So my mindset's a little different, and, you know, I was not a great math student or even science student. But the fact is that I can understand more now from the projects that the kids are doing, because it's beyond just, let's say, you know, how am I solving the genome to this, and this. It's looking at social science issues, right? It's looking at things which are beyond just what you may think of science research, that's bleeding into the humanities as well, and, you know, sociology, which I think is unique because it's going to bring in a whole different group of students who may be intimidated by science research, right? And the more that we provide kids at the younger grade levels these more quote-unquote authentic experiences, they may feel more comfortable. And I know Tom didn't mention this, but, you know, one thing I've been sort of pushing, even my previous district, was how can we have science research be replicated at the middle school level, at the elementary school level, so it's not as intimidating or threatening, and they've started doing that, right? I mean, especially in 6th grade, and also working with the elementary school students. But we've seen that in the other subject areas as well, the older students working down with the younger students. So the more that we can make those connections and kind of take away the taboo factor of it, that I'm not part of this group, and, you know, that's not the experience I had in high school. That's really part of our charge as well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it shouldn't be just, you know, that's what made it. When you talk about cultural competency, and we talk about the whole child, it all bleeds together. It shouldn't just be about this type of track, experiencing these wonderful things in Pelham Public Schools. It should be all children, right? And it should be all the schools. So that's been a major piece of the work, at least I've been doing here, trying to do for the past 7 years, is trying to create more of a systemic approach to it. And really, it's these guys who do that heavy lift. So I think, again, we've had some really good foundational work and some really good experiences. And now the challenge is to see how we kind of replicate it throughout the system even more than we've done it. And I think we knew that at the outset of the last plan. Like, you know, capstones, okay, that's great. But what does it mean for us now in the different grade levels, different subject areas that are not as traditional as you think they should be doing this work in AP class? I know that, you know, this has been different in terms of our having these conversations when we have these, you know, the work sessions, but it's been good to be able to at least, you know, break it off and not just be someone at the podium talking at you. Or, I'm hoping that the next time we do this too, we can have even more of an opportunity, a little bit of a dialogue as well. Because I know, I just wanted to make sure that you walked away tonight. The main objective was you can now visualize and understand what authentic learning really does mean. Hopefully you can, you know, help us with that as well. And I think that I want to thank you guys for doing a great job.
Thank you. I want to just add one piece too, and thank you, Steve, for laying out a great presentation and bringing the experts to really show this. It just brings me right back to the whole macro level of, you know, what I mentioned back at the beginning, the whole work that the state is starting to do around looking at graduation requirements. Because when you look at the system that is set up, it was set up in 1900 for a certain outcomes. And it was basic education, literacy, numeracy, democracy, and standardization. It's seat time, it's based on a certain number of credits. And how do we measure that? We've been very proud of our Regents exams for, 100 years, but the goals of education have changed. And when you hear what these professionals are doing with kids from kindergarten up, and then you think about, okay, none of them measured how exciting it was to measure that with a Regents exam, or a 3 through 8 assessment, or anything in between. It was all about this far more rigorous, far more complex, far more challenging, developing the skills that these future jobs are looking for. So we've got pockets of incredible work going on, not just in science, not just in math, but you saw it across all disciplines and all grades. So I think for us as a profession, and I think this is why it's so important that we have a voice in leading the way in giving the state feedback. If we want a different outcome for this system, we've got to change the system. So for people who say, oh my God, you're going to get rid of a Regents exam, they need to come talk to our physics teachers. And they need to hear what they just said about the incredible teaching and learning and the outcomes that are happening in those classes that didn't happen before, because they were handicapped by that competing tension of having to answer to a test, yet wanting to teach the way that they really believe it should be. So I just can't thank you all enough for sharing, for the work you've done that led to this, because none of this was easy. And that's the other part of this that's challenging. It takes time, it takes training, it takes collaboration, it takes the inquiry process as a professional to build, as Steve said, for his work in the district in 7 years, this wasn't built overnight. So I'm just incredibly proud and thrilled to be part of this work, and I think we're at an exciting time, not just for our district, but I think for the state. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you board for giving us that time.
So we have communications and comments from the public. We have a huge audience, but we've already heard from you. But does anybody have anything else they want to add? Nope. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, so moved. Yes.
Yeah, I can't make the motion.
So moved.
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good night.